The day my mother died, my stepfather stood beside her bed and promised he would protect everything she had left behind. 3 weeks later, I discovered he had already started selling it. The first thing he took was her jewelry, then her furniture, then the paintings my father had bought before he died. But the one thing he couldn't take was the old metal safe hidden beneath my mother's workshop. And he had no idea that my mother had left the key to me. My name is Emily. And until my mother's funeral, I believed Richard was simply the man who had helped her through the final years of her life. I was wrong. Completely wrong. My mother, Susan, had been sick for months. During those months, Richard handled everything. The bills, the appointments, the house, even the legal paperwork. I trusted him because my mother trusted him. At least, that's what I thought. Then one morning, I received a phone call from the bank. "Miss Carter, we're calling about a transfer request." "What transfer?" There was a pause. "The property." My heart dropped. "What property?" "Your mother's home." I immediately sat down. "My mother passed away 3 weeks ago. The house hasn't been sold." The bank employee hesitated. "According to the documents we have, a sale is currently being processed." I couldn't breathe. "Who authorized it?" "Richard Hale." I hung up and drove straight to the house. Richard was in the garage loading boxes into a truck. "What are you doing?" He turned around. "Emily. Why is the bank telling me you're selling Mom's house?" His expression changed. I was going to explain. "When?" He didn't answer. I walked past him. The living room looked almost empty. My mother's favorite chair was gone. The dining table was gone. Even the painting my father had given her on their 20th anniversary was missing. "You've been selling her things. They're mine now." "No." Richard looked at me. "We were married." "That doesn't make everything yours." He stepped closer. "Your mother left everything to me." "Then show me the will." His face tightened. "I don't have to show you anything." That was the moment I knew something was wrong. My mother had always told me that our home was protected. She had never explained what she meant. I suddenly remembered something she said a few days before she died. "If anything happens, Emily, don't sign anything Richard gives you." At the time, I thought the medication was making her confused. Now I wasn't so sure. I left the house that afternoon. But before I reached my car, I noticed something strange. The old workshop door was unlocked. Mom had always kept it locked. I went inside. Dust covered the workbench. Boxes were stacked against the walls. Then I noticed something behind an old cabinet, a small brass key. Tied to it was a piece of paper. 3 words were written in my mother's handwriting. "For Emily only." My hands began shaking. I remembered the old workshop. My father had built it himself. And according to Mom, there was something beneath it that no one was supposed to know about. I moved the cabinet. Behind it was a narrow wooden door. I opened it. A staircase led downward. I turned on my phone flashlight. At the bottom was a concrete room, and against the far wall stood an old metal safe. My mother's key fit perfectly. But before I opened it, I heard footsteps upstairs. Someone was coming. I quickly switched off my flashlight. The footsteps stopped. Then Richard's voice echoed through the workshop. "Emily?" I didn't answer. He called again. "Emily, where are you?" I stayed silent. Then I heard him enter the hidden room. His flashlight moved across the walls, and when he saw the safe, he whispered something that made my blood run cold. "So she really did give you the key." I stepped out of the darkness. "How do you know about this?" Richard stared at me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Your mother told me about the safe." "Then why didn't you open it?" He looked at the lock. "Because I never had the key." I tightened my grip around it. "What is inside?" "Things you don't understand." "Then explain." "You don't want to know." "That isn't your decision." Richard stepped toward me. Emily, listen to me. Whatever your mother told you, she didn't know the whole story. I looked at the safe, then at him. Maybe. I inserted the key. Richard's face changed. Don't. I turned it. Click. The lock opened. I pulled the door toward me. Inside were dozens of folders, bank statements, property records, old photographs, and one envelope sitting directly in the center. My name was written across it. Emily. I opened it. The letter began with 4 words. If you're reading this. I looked at Richard. He was standing completely still, and for the first time since my mother's death, I saw fear in his eyes. I continued reading. Then Richard has lied to you. I looked up. Richard whispered, "Close the letter." I didn't, because I had finally found the secret my mother had spent years protecting, and whatever was inside that envelope was about to change everything I believed about my family. I read the first line again. If you're reading this, then Richard has lied to you. My hands were shaking. I looked at Richard. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked afraid. What did you lie about? I asked. He took a step toward me. Emily, give me the letter. No. You don't understand what you're reading. Then explain it. He said nothing. I looked back at the letter. The next sentence made my heart pound. The house is not what Richard wants. I frowned. What did that mean? I continued. He wants what your father left beneath it. I looked around the underground room. What did Dad leave? Richard finally spoke. Your father was involved in something before he died. What? Property. That doesn't explain anything. He discovered something. What? Richard looked at the safe. Records. What kind of records? Financial records. I stared at him. Why would financial records be hidden beneath the house? Because some people wanted them destroyed. Who? He didn't answer. Richard. Your father had enemies. Who? He looked away. I don't know. I laughed bitterly. You expect me to believe that? I know how this looks. It looks like my mother knew you were lying. She did. That answer shocked me. You admit it? Yes. Then why did she stay with you? Because she needed me. No. I shook my head. Because you threatened her? His expression changed. No. Then why? Because I protected her. From what? He didn't answer. I folded the letter. Get out. Emily. Get out of my mother's house. He stared at me. Then he slowly walked upstairs. Before leaving, he turned around. Don't trust anyone who tells you the house is worthless. Then he disappeared. I remained underground, alone. I looked at the folders inside the safe. There were dozens. Property deeds, bank records, company agreements, and photographs of people I didn't recognize. But one photograph immediately caught my attention. It showed my father standing beside another man. On the back was a date, June 14th, 2012, and one name, Daniel Carter. I knew that name. Daniel had been my father's attorney. He had handled several family legal matters. I picked up another document. It was a bank statement. A company called Hale Financial Holdings had transferred hundreds of thousands of dollars into an account connected to my mother. I stared at the amount. $65,000. Why would anyone pay my mother that much money? I searched the folder again. There was another transfer, then another. The payments continued for years. My mother had received millions, and she had never told me. I suddenly understood why Richard wanted the safe. It wasn't the house. It was the information. The next morning, I took the documents to my mother's old attorney. His name was Daniel Carter. When I walked into his office, he immediately recognized the folder in my hands. His expression changed. Where did you get that? From my mother's safe. He stood. Emily, you shouldn't have opened it. Why? Because those documents were supposed to remain sealed. Who sealed them? Your mother. Why? He didn't answer. I placed the bank statement on his desk. Why was Mom receiving money from Hale Financial Holdings? Daniel looked at the paper, then he sat down. Your mother was protecting the property. From Richard? From everyone. I stared at him. What does that mean? He sighed. Your father discovered that several companies were trying to purchase land surrounding your family's property. Why? Because the land was going to become extremely valuable. That still doesn't explain the payments. No. He opened a drawer, then pulled out an old file. This is what your father discovered. Inside was a map. The property was marked in red, but beneath it was something else. An underground structure. I looked at Daniel. What is this? An old storage facility. Under our property? Yes. Who built it? Your grandfather. I stared at the map. Why? Your grandfather used it to store company records. What records? Financial records. The same ones in the safe? Daniel nodded. Some of them. I looked at the map again. Where are the others? He hesitated. We don't know. Dad knew. Yes. And Mom knew. Yes. Richard knew. Daniel looked uncomfortable. Yes. I stood. Then why did everyone lie to me? Because your father wanted you protected. Protected from what? Daniel looked directly at me. From the people who wanted those records. Who? He didn't answer. Instead, he said, Emily, you need to leave the property. No. You don't understand. I understand that everyone keeps telling me to leave. Because it's dangerous. Then tell me the truth. Daniel remained silent. I turned toward the door. Then he said, Your father wasn't killed because of the house. I stopped. What? Daniel lowered his voice. He was killed because of what he found. I turned around. You're saying Dad's death wasn't an accident? Daniel looked at me. I said you need to be careful. Was it an accident? He didn't answer. That was enough. I walked out. I called Laura. She had been my father's closest friend. She answered immediately. Emily? I need to ask you something. What? Was Dad's death really an accident? Silence. Then she said, Who told you that? Daniel. Another silence. Laura? Where are you? Daniel's office. Leave. Why? Just leave. I walked toward my car. Laura, what happened? I'll tell you everything when I see you. When? Tonight. That evening, Laura arrived at my house. She brought an old folder. This belonged to your father. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. My father, my mother, Richard, and Victoria Hale. I recognized Victoria. She was Richard's sister. But I had never seen her with my parents. Why were they together? Business. What business? Laura looked at me. Your father was trying to stop a property deal. What deal? A development project. Who was behind it? Victoria. And Richard? He was involved. My stomach tightened. Did Dad know? Yes. Did Mom? Yes. Then why did she marry Richard? Laura looked down. Because by then, she believed she had no choice. I stared at her. What happened? Your mother found out Richard had been moving money through several accounts. How much? Hundreds of thousands. Was he stealing? Not exactly. What was he doing? Helping Victoria acquire properties. I looked at the bank statements. The payments to Mom. Were connected. To the property? Yes. But why would Victoria pay Mom? Because your mother owned the land they needed. I froze. What? Laura unfolded another map. The property wasn't just our house. My mother secretly owned several surrounding parcels. She had purchased them through a company called Westfield Holdings. I stared at the name. Mom owned this? Yes. How? Your father helped her establish it. When? Years ago. I felt overwhelmed. My mother had secretly built a network of properties around our home. She had been protecting something. But what? Then Laura handed me another document. It was dated 3 weeks before my father died. At the bottom was my mother's signature, and one sentence: the original documents must never fall into Richard Hale's hands. I looked at Laura. What original documents? She shook her head. I don't know. But I did. The answer was somewhere beneath the house. That night, I returned to the workshop. I opened the safe again. There was one folder I hadn't noticed. It was hidden beneath the bottom shelf. On the cover were 2 words: Project C-17. I opened it. Inside was an old map. The underground facility had 2 rooms, not one. I looked toward the wall. There had been another room beneath the property all along, and according to the map, the entrance was hidden behind a concrete wall. I ran my hand along it. Nothing. Then I noticed a small metal plate. It had one word engraved on it: Carter. I pressed it. A section of the wall moved. A narrow passage appeared. I switched on my flashlight. At the end of the passage was another locked door, and beneath the door was a piece of paper. I picked it up. Only one sentence was written on it. If you found the second room, leave the property immediately. I stared at the warning. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and someone whispered my name. Emily. I recognized the voice. It was Richard. But this time, he wasn't alone. Emily. I froze. Richard stood behind me, but someone was standing beside him. A woman. I recognized her immediately. Victoria Hale, Richard's sister. The same woman whose company had transferred hundreds of thousands of dollars to my mother's secret account. I stepped away from the hidden door. What are you doing here? Victoria smiled. We need to talk. No, you need to leave. Richard looked at her. She found the second room. Victoria's smile disappeared. You shouldn't have opened that passage. I stared at her. Why? Because your father wanted it sealed. My father is dead. Yes. And now I'm going to find out why. Victoria looked at Richard, then back at me. Emily, there are things about your father you don't understand. Then explain them. She took a slow breath. Your father wasn't protecting the house. He was protecting the documents. From you? No. From whom? Victoria didn't answer. I stepped closer. Was my father investigating you? Yes. Was he going to expose you? Yes. Did you have anything to do with his death? Richard immediately looked at Victoria. She said nothing. That silence was louder than any confession. I backed away. You did. Victoria shook her head. You don't know what happened. Then tell me. Your father was involved in something much bigger than a property dispute. What? The records beneath this house. I pointed toward the hidden passage. What is in the second room? Victoria's expression hardened. Something that should have been destroyed years ago. I looked at Richard. And you? I was trying to protect your mother. I almost laughed. You've been selling her property. I was trying to stop the development company. By selling the house to them? I never completed the sale. Because I stopped you. Richard said nothing. Victoria stepped forward. Emily, give us the documents. No. You don't understand what they can do. They can expose you. Yes. She didn't deny it. My heart started pounding. I turned and ran through the hidden passage. Behind me, I heard Richard shout, "Emily!" I reached the second door and locked it behind me. Then I switched on my flashlight. The room was small. There was an old metal table, a filing cabinet, and several sealed boxes. I opened the first box. Inside were property records. The second contained bank statements. The third contained photographs. I picked one up. It showed my father standing outside the development company's office. On the back was a date, 3 days before his death. Another photograph showed Richard meeting Victoria. Another showed Daniel Carter. All 3 men had been connected. Then I found something that made my hands shake. A bank transfer. $65,000. Susan Carter. The money came from Victoria's company, but beneath the transfer was a handwritten note. Payment for silence. I stared at it. My mother had been paid to stay silent. But why? I searched the remaining documents. Then I found a letter from my father. "Susan, I know what they offered you. Don't accept it. If they pay you, they will own the truth." I felt tears fill my eyes. My mother had received the money anyway, but maybe she hadn't taken it for herself. I kept searching. Then I found another document, a legal trust. The beneficiary was Emily Carter. I stopped breathing. My father had created the trust before he died, and it contained the property, the house, the surrounding land, everything. Richard couldn't legally sell it. He never had the authority. The documents he had shown me were false. I suddenly understood why he was desperate to get inside the safe. He needed the original trust. Without it, he could pretend the property belonged to him. With it, his entire plan collapsed. I grabbed the documents and rushed back toward the door. But before I reached it, I heard voices outside. Victoria, Richard, and another man. I recognized the third voice, Daniel Carter. I opened the door slightly. Daniel was standing in the passage. "You should have stayed out of this," he said. I stepped into view. "You're all working together." "No." "Then why are you here?" "Because your father left something behind." "The original survey?" "Yes." "Why is it so important?" Daniel looked at the documents in my hands. "Because it proves who owns the underground facility." I looked at the trust. "My family owns the property." "The property above ground." "What about below?" Daniel smiled. "That is where things become complicated." Richard stepped forward. "Daniel, this has gone too far." Daniel looked at him. "You don't get to decide that." Richard lowered his voice. "She is Susan's daughter. And? She deserves the truth." Daniel laughed. "The truth is exactly what will destroy her." I looked at him. "Try me." Daniel's expression changed. "Your grandfather was involved in illegal property acquisitions." I froze. "What?" "He secretly purchased land before development announcements." "That isn't illegal." "Not by itself," Daniel continued. "But he used private information to force families into selling below market value." I looked at the old records. "My father found out." "Yes." "And he wanted to expose it." "Yes." "Then why did he stop?" Daniel didn't answer. Richard did. "Because he discovered something worse." "What?" Richard looked at the floor. "The original records weren't just about your grandfather." I waited. "They contained names." "Whose names?" "Everyone involved. Victoria, Daniel, Richard, and several other powerful people." I looked at Victoria. "That's why you wanted them?" "Yes." "That's why you paid my mother?" "Yes." "And that's why Dad died?" Victoria's face tightened. "No." "You expect me to believe that?" "I didn't cause your father's death." "Then who did?" She looked at Daniel. Daniel looked away. That was enough. I escaped the house with the documents. Laura was waiting in her car. I handed her the trust. She read it. then looked at me. Emily, this changes everything. Richard never owned the property. No. He couldn't sell it. No. So why did he try? Because he wanted the buyer to believe he had authority. Could that sale still happen? Not if we prove the original trust. I gave her the financial records. And these? She scanned them. These could expose the entire development scheme. Then we need to protect them. Yes. I looked back toward the house. There's more. What? My mother received money from Victoria. How much? More than 2 million. Laura's face changed. Why? I thought it was payment for silence. Maybe. But I found something else. I showed her my father's letter. He warned Mom not to accept the money. Laura read it carefully. Then she pointed to one sentence. If they pay you, they will own the truth. She looked at me. Your mother may have taken the money for another reason. What? To build the trust. I stared at her. What do you mean? Look at the dates. I checked. The biggest payment had arrived shortly before the trust was established. Then the money had been transferred into protected accounts. My mother hadn't spent it. She had moved it. She had used their money to protect me from them. I whispered, Mom was playing them. Laura nodded. She was. For the first time since my mother's death, I smiled. She hadn't betrayed my father. She hadn't betrayed me. She had been fighting them from inside. That night, I returned to the house one final time. Richard was waiting. You know now, he said. Yes. I should have told you. Yes. I was afraid. You should have been. He nodded. I loved your mother. Then why did you betray her? Because Victoria had evidence against me. What evidence? My financial records. So she controlled you? Yes. Did you help her? For years. I stared at him. And Dad? Richard looked down. I followed him the night he died. My heart stopped. Why? He had the original survey. Where did he go? To meet Victoria. What happened? Richard swallowed. Daniel arrived. What happened next? They argued. About the records? Yes. And then? Richard looked at me. I left. You left Dad with Daniel? Yes. Why? Because I was scared. I stepped closer. Did you see Daniel after Dad's car crashed? Richard nodded. Yes. Was he near the car? Yes. I felt my entire body go cold. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because I thought he would come after your mother. I looked at him. And now? Now he will come after you. Before I could answer, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. One message. You have 24 hours to surrender the documents. I showed Richard. His face went pale. Then another message appeared. Your mother had the same choice. I stared at the screen. And suddenly I realized something. My mother hadn't died with all her secrets. She had left them behind. For me. And now I had only 24 hours to uncover the final truth before the people who had been hunting my family for years came for me. The message stayed on my screen. You have 24 hours to surrender the documents. Then another message appeared. Your mother had the same choice. I stared at those words until my hands went cold. They knew about Mom. They knew about the documents. And somehow, they knew exactly how frightened I was. I looked at Richard. Who sent this? I don't know. You're lying. I swear I'm not. Laura took the phone from my hand. Don't respond. Why? Because whoever sent this wants to know how much you have. I nodded. Then I remembered the bank records. There is something we haven't checked. What? My mother's account. Laura looked at me. The secret account? Yes. I pulled out the documents from the safe. The account number ended in 4721. The first major deposit was from Victoria, but there were other deposits, different companies, different names, and one final payment, $18,000. I pointed at it. This one is different. Laura examined the statement. Where did it come from? Westfield Holdings. I looked at her. That was Mom's company. Are you sure? Yes. Then why would her own company send her money? I didn't know. We traced the transaction. The money had been moved from Westfield to my mother's private account. Then 3 days later, it disappeared. Where did it go? Laura followed the transaction. Her eyes widened. Your father's attorney. Daniel? Yes. I felt sick. Mom transferred money to Daniel? Apparently. Why? Laura turned the page. There was a note attached to the transfer. Legal protection, Project C-17. I stared at it. Mom was paying Daniel to protect the documents, or to hide them. I thought about the way Daniel had behaved, the warnings, the threats, his obsession with the original survey. Something wasn't right. The next morning, we went to Daniel's office. He wasn't there. His assistant told us he had left early. Where did he go? I don't know. Did he say anything? She hesitated. He said he was meeting someone about the Carter property. Laura and I exchanged a look. Who? She shook her head. I turned toward the door. Then I noticed a folder sitting on Daniel's desk. The label read, C-17, Final Transfer. I picked it up. Laura immediately said, Emily, don't. But it was too late. I opened it. Inside was a legal agreement. The property would be transferred to Carter Development Group. The seller was listed as Richard Hale, and the beneficiary was listed as Emily Carter. I froze. My name is on this. Laura read it. They're trying to make it look like you approved the sale. But I didn't. I know. There isn't even my signature. There's a signature on the final page. I turned it over. My name appeared, but it wasn't my handwriting. Someone had forged my signature. I felt anger replace my fear. They're setting me up. Yes. Why? To make it appear that you voluntarily transferred the property. I looked at the document. Then we expose them. Laura nodded. But first we need the original trust. I have it. No. You have a copy. I froze. What? Look at the bottom. There was a small stamp. Copy. Not valid without original. My heart dropped. So they can still challenge it. Yes. Where is the original? Laura looked at me. That is what your father was protecting. That afternoon we returned to the workshop. The safe was empty except for the documents we had already removed. I searched everything again. Drawers, shelves, the walls, nothing. Then I remembered the photograph of my father. He was standing in front of the workshop. Behind him was an old wooden clock. I looked at the wall. The clock was still there. I removed it. Behind it was a small compartment. Inside was a key, not the brass key from my mother, a silver key, and beneath it was a handwritten note. C-17, third location. I looked at Laura. Third location? She nodded. Your father created layers. What does that mean? He knew people would search the obvious places. I held up the key. So the second room wasn't the final hiding place. No. We searched the property records. The third location was marked on an old map. It wasn't inside the house. It was beneath the detached garage. We drove there. The garage had been closed for years. The silver key opened a small metal door hidden behind the shelves. Inside was another narrow passage. But this time there was no warning. Only a wooden box. I opened it. Inside was the original trust, the original survey, and a small voice recorder. My father's voice played when I pressed the button. Emily, If you are hearing this, then you have found what I couldn't safely give you. I closed my eyes. I need you to understand something. His voice cracked slightly. I never wanted you involved in this. A pause. But I knew there might come a day when you would have to protect yourself. I looked at Laura. The recording continued. Richard is not innocent. My heart tightened. But he is not the person who started this. Then came the sentence I had been waiting for. Daniel Carter knows where the money came from. The recording ended. I stared at the recorder. That's it? Laura shook her head. Look at the box. Under the recorder was a folded piece of paper. I opened it. One account number was written on it, and beneath it, follow the first payment. We went straight to the bank. With the proper legal documents, the bank provided the historical records. The first payment into my mother's secret account had happened 11 years earlier. Not from Victoria, not from Richard, not from Daniel. From an offshore holding company. The company's beneficial owner was hidden, but the bank records contained one clue, a lawyer's authorization, signed by Daniel Carter. I stared at the document. Daniel arranged the first payment. Laura nodded, and the money continued after that. Why? We followed the chain. The offshore company transferred money to Victoria. Victoria transferred it to my mother. My mother moved it into protected accounts. Then she transferred part of it to Daniel for legal protection. The money had traveled in a circle. But there was one final account, a private trust. The beneficiary was not my mother, not my father, not Richard. It was me. I stared at the document. Mom built this for me. Yes. Why didn't she tell me? Because she knew someone was watching. I remembered her final days, the fear in her eyes, the way she had told me not to trust Richard, the way she had squeezed my hand when I asked about the house. She had been trying to tell me. I simply hadn't understood. That evening, Richard came to see me. He looked different, older, tired. I know where Daniel is. I stared at him. Where? He went to the old warehouse. The one on the property records? Yes. Why? To destroy the remaining documents. I immediately stood. How do you know? Because he called me. What did he say? He said if I didn't cooperate, he would make sure I was blamed for everything. I studied his face. Did you cooperate? No. Why now? He looked down. Because I finally realized something. What? Your mother never trusted me. I said nothing. She knew what I had done. What did you do? I helped Victoria acquire properties. And Dad? I gave Daniel information about your father. My chest tightened. What information? Where your father kept his records. I stared at him. You helped them? Yes. And now you're sorry. Yes. Sorry doesn't change anything. I know. He placed a small envelope on the table. This belonged to your mother. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. My mother was standing beside my father. On the back she had written, "If Richard ever gives Emily this, he finally understands." I looked at Richard. What does that mean? He looked away. It means I was supposed to give this to you after your mother died. Why didn't you? Because I was still trying to save myself. I felt tears rise. What does Mom want me to know? Richard whispered. She knew your father was in danger. I froze. She knew? Yes. And she knew Daniel was involved? She suspected. Then why didn't she stop Dad from meeting him? She tried. How? She paid him. I looked at the bank records. The money. Richard nodded. She thought if she paid Daniel enough, he would leave your father alone. But he didn't. No. Richard stood. Emily, your mother didn't betray your father. She was trying to save him. Later that night, Laura and I went to the warehouse. The door was unlocked. Inside, papers were scattered everywhere. Someone had been searching. Then we heard a sound from the back room. We moved quietly. Daniel stood beside a metal barrel. Several folders were on the floor. He looked at us. "You shouldn't have come." I held up the original trust. "You were looking for this." His face changed. "Give it to me." "No. You don't understand what you're holding." "I understand exactly what I'm holding." Daniel stepped forward. "That document can destroy your family." "No." I looked him directly in the eyes. "It can finally expose the people who destroyed mine." He went silent. Then I noticed something behind him. A second person. Richard. But Richard wasn't standing with Daniel. He was holding a folder, and he looked terrified. "Emily," he said. "What?" "Your father left one final document." "What document?" Richard opened the folder. Inside was a single page. At the top was my father's handwriting. "The person behind Project C-17 is not who you think." I stared at the page. Then I looked at Daniel. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid. And I realized the biggest secret was still hidden. Because my father hadn't been investigating only Daniel. He had been investigating someone above him. Someone powerful enough to control Victoria. Someone powerful enough to control Richard. And someone my mother had apparently known for years. The name was written at the bottom of the page. I read it once, then again. My heart stopped. It was a name I never expected to see. Susan Carter, my mother. I looked at Richard. "What does this mean?" He couldn't answer. Daniel slowly stepped backward. And suddenly I realized my mother had not only been protecting the secret, she had been part of it. I stared at the name on the document. Susan Carter, my mother. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then I looked at Daniel. "You said my mother was protecting the records." "She was." "Then why is her name on my father's document?" Daniel didn't answer. I turned toward Richard. "You knew." He looked down. "I knew she was involved." "Involved in what?" "The original agreement." I felt my chest tighten. "What original agreement?" Richard took a breath. "Your mother wasn't working against the people behind Project C-17. I stared at him. "She was working with them." The words hit me harder than I expected. "No. She made a deal with them before your father discovered everything." "What kind of deal?" "She agreed to help them acquire the surrounding properties." I shook my head. "That doesn't sound like Mom." "I know. She hated what they were doing. She changed later." "Why?" Richard looked at the document. "Because your father found out what they were planning." "What?" "They weren't just buying land." "Then what?" "They wanted the underground facility." "Why?" "Because of what was stored there. The records, the evidence, everything my grandfather had hidden." I looked at the original survey. "What did Mom promise them?" Richard hesitated. "She promised to help locate the records." I stepped backward. "But she never gave them the records." "No." "Why?" "Because she changed her mind." I looked at Daniel. "Is that true?" Daniel finally spoke. "Yes." "Why did she change?" "Because your father confronted her." "What did he say?" Daniel looked away. "He told her that if she helped them, she would lose you." I closed my eyes. That sounded like my mother. She could make terrible choices when she believed she was protecting me, but she could never choose anything over my safety. "What happened next?" Richard answered. "She secretly created Westfield Holdings to buy the surrounding properties." "Yes." "So she could stop the developers." "Yes." I looked at the documents. "She used their money against them." Daniel nodded. "That was the beginning of the end." I looked at my father's final document again. His handwriting was clear. Susan Carter was involved in Project C-17. But beneath that sentence was another line. "She became our greatest protection." I looked at Daniel. "You left that part out." He said nothing. I turned to Richard. You knew? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because your mother made me promise. What promise? That I would never tell you how she had become involved. Why? Because she wanted you to remember her as your mother. My eyes filled with tears. She knew I would hate her. She thought you might. I looked at the photograph of my parents. My mother was smiling. My father had his arm around her. They looked happy, but behind that photograph was a secret that had lasted for more than a decade. Daniel finally stepped forward. There is something else. I looked at him. What? Your mother didn't create the secret account for herself. I know. She created it because she needed to move the money. Which money? The money the development group was paying her. For helping them? Yes. But she stopped helping them. She stopped after your father confronted her. Then why keep the money? Because she planned to use it to protect the property. I remembered the bank records. Millions had passed through the account. Most of it had eventually been transferred into protected trusts. My mother had taken their money and turned it into a legal shield. She had outsmarted them. But there was still one question. What happened to the remaining money? Daniel looked at me. Your mother left it to you. I froze. How much? Enough to make sure you could keep the property. I couldn't speak. The house wasn't simply something my parents had left behind. It had been protected deliberately. For me. Then Laura noticed something on the document. Emily. What? Look at the date. I checked. It was dated 3 weeks before my father's death. That can't be. Why? Because Dad supposedly changed his will after that. Laura shook her head. He didn't. What? The will Richard showed you was probably fake. I looked at Richard. His face went pale. I didn't create it. Then who did? I don't know. Daniel looked away. I stared at him. You know. He didn't answer. Daniel. Finally, he said. Victoria. I felt anger rise. So the will saying Richard inherited everything was fake. Yes. And the property sale was based on that fake will. Yes. And the forged deed used my name. Yes. I suddenly understood the entire plan. They wanted to make me believe Richard legally owned the house. Then Richard would sell it. The developers would purchase it. And once the property was transferred, the underground records would become theirs. They didn't care about the house. They wanted what was underneath it. My phone rang. It was the bank. Ms. Carter, we've received a legal request concerning your mother's trust. What kind of request? A transfer restriction. From whom? Carter Development Group. I looked at Laura. They're trying again. Laura immediately said, Tell the bank no transfer is authorized. I already did. The banker paused. There's another issue. What? Someone has submitted a second set of ownership documents. Whose? Your mother's. I froze. My mother's? Yes. What do they say? That Susan Carter transferred the property to a private holding company. When? 2 months before her death. I stared at the phone. That isn't possible. There's a signature. It's fake. We'll need proof. I ended the call. Laura looked at me. They're using another document. I nodded. They're trying to make it look like Mom sold the property herself. Richard suddenly spoke. That's impossible. Why? Because your mother couldn't legally transfer the property. Why? Because your father had already placed it in the trust. I looked at him. Then why would they create this document? To make the court question the trust. Daniel nodded. They want to create enough conflicting paperwork to delay the case. And while the case is delayed, they can keep the property frozen. I understood. They didn't need to win immediately. They only needed to create confusion. That night, I returned to the house alone. I walked into my mother's bedroom. Everything still smelled faintly like her perfume. I sat on the edge of her bed. For the first time, I allowed myself to cry. I wish you had told me. Then I remembered the blue box, the photographs, the letter, the secret account. There had to be one final message. I searched her drawers. Nothing. Her closet. Nothing. Then I noticed the old jewelry box, the one Richard had taken after her death. I remembered seeing it in the garage. I went downstairs. It was still there. I opened it. Inside were old earrings, a wedding ring, a photograph of Mom and Dad, and beneath the lining, something hard. I pulled the lining back. A tiny memory card was hidden underneath. I inserted it into my laptop. There was one video. My mother appeared on the screen. She looked weak, but her eyes were clear. Emily. I covered my mouth. If you're watching this, then you found the final message. She took a breath. I know you will be angry with me. Tears filled her eyes. But I need you to know why I did what I did. She explained everything. Years earlier, she had agreed to cooperate with the developers because they threatened to expose financial mistakes my grandfather had made. She believed she could control the situation. Then my father discovered the truth. He confronted her, and instead of leaving her, he helped her. Together, they created Westfield Holdings. They bought the surrounding properties. They moved the money into protected trusts, and they hid the original records. My mother looked directly into the camera. I wasn't trying to protect the house. She paused. I was trying to protect you. I began crying. Your father knew the truth about me. He forgave me. And I spent the rest of my life trying to make sure you would never pay for my mistakes. Then she said something that changed everything. There is one person you cannot trust. I leaned closer. Daniel Carter. The video continued. Daniel has been working with the developers from the beginning. I froze. He helped your grandfather. He helped your father. And he helped me. But when I refused to give him the original records, she paused. He became dangerous. My heart pounded. Then came the final revelation. Emily, if Daniel tells you your father died because of Richard, don't believe him. I stopped breathing. Richard was there. But he didn't cause your father's death. My mother's voice became quieter. The person responsible is the person who had access to the car. The screen went black. I stared at it. Then I heard a sound behind me. I turned. Richard was standing in the doorway. His face was pale. Emily. I stood. Who had access to Dad's car? He didn't answer. I stepped closer. Richard. He finally whispered, Daniel. My heart stopped. And suddenly, every piece of the puzzle fell into place. Daniel hadn't been protecting the records. He had been trying to destroy them. He hadn't been helping my family. He had been manipulating everyone around us. And now that I knew the truth, he would do anything to keep it from reaching the court. I looked at Richard. What do we do? He took a breath. We expose him. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Because my mother had spent years preparing for this moment. And now, I finally had everything I needed to finish what she started. Richard stood in my mother's bedroom staring at me. Emily, we have to go. Not until you tell me the truth. He looked down. Daniel had access to your father's car. My heart stopped. My mother said the same thing. Richard nodded. She knew. Then why didn't she tell the police? Because Daniel threatened her. With what? Your life. I felt the room go silent. He told her that if she went to the police, you would be next. My eyes filled with tears. So Mom stayed quiet to protect me. Yes. And you? I was afraid too. I looked at him. But you still betrayed her. I know. For once, there was no excuse in his voice, only regret. The next morning, Laura and I took everything to the authorities. The original trust, the bank records, the Project C-17 files, my mother's video, and the photograph showing Daniel near my father's car. The investigation moved quickly. The forged property documents were exposed, the fake sale was stopped, the secret payments were traced, and Daniel's involvement in the financial scheme was uncovered. The original evidence finally proved what my father had spent years trying to expose. The developers had manipulated property purchases. Victoria had helped move the money. Richard had participated before eventually cooperating, and Daniel had been at the center of the operation. Most importantly, the original trust proved the house had never belonged to Richard. It belonged to me. Weeks later, I stood in the living room of my mother's house. The furniture she loved was back. My father's painting was hanging above the fireplace, and on the table was the letter Mom had written for me. I read it one final time. She had made mistakes, she had kept secrets, she had trusted the wrong people. But in the end, everything she did was meant to protect me. I finally understood why she had hidden the truth. She wasn't protecting the house. She was protecting her daughter. I walked outside and stood on the porch. This was the same house Richard had tried to sell, the same house the developers had fought over, the same house my father had built with his own hands. But now it was mine. Not because of the money, not because of revenge, because my parents had left me the truth. And the truth had finally defeated every lie. I looked toward the old workshop. The safe was still there, empty now. But I didn't need it anymore. The secrets were out, the documents were safe, and my family's story could finally rest. My mother once wrote, "Some truths take years to surface, but they always find their way home." She was right. Richard lost everything he tried to take. Daniel lost the protection of the people who once trusted him. And I gained something more valuable than the house. I gained the truth about my parents, the truth they had spent years protecting. And in the end, that was the greatest inheritance they could have left me.